Hello and welcome back to my channel. It's Tina. And today we're talking about some under the radar thrillers. All of these thrillers that I'm recommending today have under 5,000 reviews on Goodreads. And I know Goodreads is not the be all end all of ranking and ratings, but I feel like 5,000 is nothing, especially considering none of these have been published in 2025. So they are all backlist ones that you may have heard of, but certainly I don't think a lot of people are talking about. I'm going to go to the most popular to the least popular, but obviously, again, all of these have under 5,000 ratings, so I don't know if I'd call any of them necessarily popular. But first is The Local by Joey Hartstone, and this one is a legal thriller. Currently, it has a 4.12 rating on Goodreads and 4,578 ratings overall. All right, so again, this one's a legal thriller. It's pretty gritty, and it is set in a small East Texas town. And the main character is this man named James, who has a well-established career as a patent attorney. Because interestingly, this particular town in Texas is known for a lot of patent attorneys flocking there because apparently they're known for their juries that are making decisions in favor of the patent attorneys and these huge payouts. So anyway, that was fascinating as well. But you've got this man who is now acting as a criminal defense attorney because somebody came in from out of town during the same time that a local federal judge was murdered. And so he gets accused of this judge's murder. And for reasons, I remember a little bit about the connection, but there's definitely a connection between all of them. He decides to come out of retirement from being a criminal defense attorney and defends this guy. Lots of scenes in the courtroom, really fascinating ins and outs of the legal system. This one might be considered a little bit of a slower burn, but I think if you like slower burn legal dramas, this one's a really interesting one. Next up is Wolfe at the Table by Rapp, and I cannot believe this one doesn't have more buzz. This one came out in 2024, but it has a 3.89 rating and 3,661 ratings overall. It is dark. This one is comped to We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver, which I didn't enjoy, but it's that sort of darkness. And it is a multi-generational saga about a family that has a really troubling sibling in their midst. And this one travels many, many years. It starts in 1951 in Elmira, New York, and heads all the way to 2010. So you're sort of getting 60 years of this history of this family. And it opens with Myra, who's the oldest daughter, and she ends up getting this ride home from a stranger. And he is telling her that he is Mickey Mantle. And she's like, oh my God, amazing, right? And, she's gullible, she's young. And then they come to find out that not very long after that, he drops her off and he ends up going on to murder several people in their town. And this violence sort of follows the family for the rest of their days. This one is slowish. It is definitely more of a literary suspense, I would say, than a straight up thriller. But if you like character-driven novels, this one is so complex because, as I stated, the brother really he's the most messed up of all of them. And you sort of follow the siblings as they then come into their own families and they, sort of have their own things going on. And he becomes more and more isolated and more troubled. And then when you figure out what actually is happening to him and what he's actually doing, it's just chilling. I think this one is so smart. I think this one is actually also written by a playwright, oddly enough. And the reason this one got on my radar in the first place is because the author's mother worked at Stateville as a nurse. And Stateville is a prison in Joliet, Illinois, or it used to be. It's now defunct, but John Wayne Gacy was there for a long time. And he feels that his mother might have been the nurse that was on duty the night that he was executed. And this sort of really troubled the author. But what's fascinating too is he wove actual serial killings by John Wayne Gacy come throughout this narrative, sort of in the background. It's really about this family, but if you know anything about his killings, you're seeing them played out in the background. And this book is smart. If you want a smart mystery that is going to really hold your attention, and it's sad, it will bum you out possibly, but it's also absolutely fascinating. If you like true crime and want to consume it in a way that doesn't feel exploitative to the people or into the victims, I think this one's a really, really good one. Next is more of your popcorn thriller. This one is The Opportunist by Elise Friedman. This one came out, I think it was 2022 in December. And I think because it came out in December when people weren't really paying attention to many of the new releases, I think that's why this one's more under the radar. It only has 3,021 ratings and a 3.69 review or average overall on Goodreads. And I think this one is very smart. It's totally a popcorn thriller. And it is about America's most devious family. And Elena Shropshire is Elena is the main character. And her 76-year-old father, Ed, starts dating Kelly, his 28-year-old nurse. And she gets brought back into the picture. She's been estranged from the family for a while, but her two brothers sort of turn her on to the fact that their dad is marrying super young, and they believe that his nurse is only marrying him for their money. And these two brothers simply cannot have that. They don't want any of their inheritance to be taken. And our main character sort of has this different mindset. She's like, if it makes him happy, if she's taking care of him, whatever. But anyway, it ends up bringing her back to their family town, which she has not been in many, many years. But they have a way of blackmailing her that's really diabolical. And you come to find out that, wow, her brothers are actually terrible people. The brothers basically blackmail her to come back and stop the wedding. And Kelly, though, the nurse that is marrying the elderly man, proves to be a lot more wily than they expected, and she is not going down without a fight. There are a ton of twists and turns here. I remember the ending shocked me. If you want something that's, I don't want to call it silly, because it's definitely not silly, but it's just a little bit frothier, sort of over the top, but will definitely keep you entertained. I think The Opportunist is a good one. Next up is People Like Them by Samira Sedira. This is a book in translation. It's translated by Laura Verngaud, and this one has 2,137 ratings and a 3.48 overall average, which surprises me because this one I think should be rated higher, but this one is pretty dark. It is psychological suspense, and it's actually inspired by a true story about a couple in an insular French village whose lives are upended when a family of outsiders moves into their town. And this one is about a family that moves into this tight-knit community in France, and it centers on Anna and Constant, who live with their two daughters, and they live in this peaceful mountain village of Carmack. And Carmack is sort of largely deaf to the troubles of the real world. It's very insular, and then a wealthy and flashy family move in right next door to them. And they are not quiet about their wealth. They have flashy cars, and they're sort of doing a renovation on their home that disrupts the village. And then something happens, and both families begin experiencing financial troubles, which is something they're not used to. And also a noteworthy thing about this family is that they are not white. And so this, again, they're sort of blaming it on, oh, they're too flashy with their wealth, but there is definitely underlying tones of racism. And then something horrifying happens one day, and all of the tensions and things that had been brewing come to a head. And People Like Them sort of explores the question of how could a seemingly normal person get to this point to commit this atrocious crime, and how do you come to terms with it if your loved one is somebody that commits this horrible crime. It's also about how well do you really know your family. It is very dark. It's also pretty quick. It's, I want to say, about 200 or so pages, so it goes by fast, but it is one that just sort of explores the complexity of human nature. Highly recommend it. And again, I don't see very many people talking about this one at all. Next is Lights Out in Lincolnwood by Geoff Radkey, and this one has 1,906 ratings and a 3.5 overall average, and I enjoyed this one very much. It is more of a almost into-the-world dystopian thriller than anything else, and it's also oddly funny. I would call it domestic suspense. That's the overall thing you're getting here, because it really is about these people that are in this neighborhood, and they have to figure out what they are going to do when all of the lights go out in Lincolnwood. And they are a typical American family, but this is a global calamity that everybody is faced with. And it sounds like it's very bleak. And of course, there are things that are definitely dark about this, but it's got a light undertone, which I appreciated. And everyone, and I remember the beginning of this book, all the four of the family members are sort of going about their day. This one has to go to work, these two have to go to school, this one's making breakfast and, being mad about something. And they all have these obsessions that they're focused on. But then as the day begins, the dad is riding the train to Manhattan because that's where he works. And then the world comes to a stop. They can't get on their phones. The lights are out, everything. And they have to decide, is this the end of life as we know it, or is it going to come back on? This takes place over the course of 4 days, so it's very compact as a novel, and it basically figures out, is this family going to hold it together? Are they going to survive? Are they going to get over their petty squabbles? They will irritate you throughout. I mean, these characters are definitely flawed. I remember the mom has a bit of a drinking problem, a pretty significant one, and sort of embarrasses herself at this barbecue, but also they were oddly just, I don't know if it's charming. You just sort of feel bad for them because you can tell they've never really gone through anything like this, of course, but like they were more sheltered, I think, than your average family. I think what's fun about this one is that even though they're going through this calamity, they're sort of clinging tightly to the life they once had and worrying about things that they used to worry about, even though it's like, guys, there's much bigger issues at play here. I felt like this was a really realistic dystopian novel, and it just sort of feels like actually what people would do if the end of the world was near. But anyway, I enjoyed this one. Next is Adrift by Lisa Brideau. This one has 1,856 ratings with a 3.55 overall rating. And again, I disagree with almost all of these. For me, all of these were 4 stars or above. This one is also a little bit dystopian because it is about a woman who wakes up off the coast of Canada in a boat with no idea who she is or why she is there, and she sort of figures this out and starts doing a little investigating around the boat, and then finds a note that says, "Start over, don't make yourself known, don't look back." And S is not great at following instructions, and she decides that she has to have answers, and she ends up sailing and figuring out, like, first that she can sail. And so she sails across the ocean to this turbulent town, and she's hoping, of course, to find answers. She is uncovering clues and sort of figuring things out as she goes, but mostly she wants to figure out, who was I and why was I put on this boat? This is a climate change novel, so definitely know that the author was so smart with how she incorporated those elements, and it's a bit character driven, but I enjoyed that. I enjoyed getting to know S as a character, and you come to find out she was a bit of a badass in her former life, and of course there's reasons that she was put away. I feel like you did get plenty of answers with this one. I wasn't left like wondering, with a lot of question marks, but it is scary. It's spooky because there are things that are incorporated here, such as this one's by a Canadian author, and basically the United States and the rich folks are starting to come up north because the land in America is becoming unusable, and the people that have the means are like trying to colonize Canada basically, and use their natural resources. So I thought that was very interesting. I did read this one a couple of years ago though, but overall I think this was very intriguing. If you like survival stories that have a little bit of this climate crisis angle, I definitely recommend this one. All right, I know I've said a lot, like this is not really a thriller. This one, baby, is a popcorn thriller, and I loved it. It's A Secret Worth Keeping by Drew Strickland. This one has 1,158 ratings and a 3.72 overall average. These characters, man, it is a lover's weekend, and then their perfect getaway turns into a nightmare when they stumble upon a dead body. Clearly, they should be calling the police, but Joel reveals to Stella that there are things that he has done or things that he is connected to that makes her understand that there's no way that they can involve law enforcement. So Stella has no choice but to go along with Joel's plans to hide the body, and she's starting to realize, wow, I never knew this person. I definitely think he is not the man that I thought he was. But she sort of gets in too deep and finds herself caught in the madness for this one. I loved it. I thought it was so silly and so fun, and just one of those books where you're like following these characters and you want to throttle them, like, why are you doing this? There would have been an easy resolution, just call the cops, but like obviously you wouldn't have a story if you did this. I was anxious. I was on the edge of my seat. This was a one sitting read. I did this one on audio, and I want to say it was like 6 hours max, so you can definitely get through this in a day. I think this one would be a great palate cleanser. So I'm going on Goodreads, obviously, to look at the ratings for these. And can we talk a minute about how bad their search function is? Like, it's actually incredible. I can type in the exact title and it doesn't pull it up. Like, finally, I found this next one is Birthday Girl by Niko Wolfe. This one only has 294 ratings and a 3.5 average. I love this one. This one is the Gone Girl comp that you've been looking for. It is a page turner. I freaking loved it. This one is about a man and a woman who were in love, and they went on some sort of like lovers getaway, and she disappeared and was never heard from again. It was one of those books where I was like, what is happening? How is this possible? Because now it is many years later, it's like 20 years ago, I think, and Jonathan, the main character, is seeing his wife everywhere. And back in the day, for some reason, I guess he saw his wife get into this car, and the police somehow like let him off. Like he didn't get accused of her disappearance. And he then 20 years later becomes obsessed with figuring out, is Maddie still alive? Who is she? And what really happened to her? This one is very propulsive. Again, I would say this one is a very much popcorn thriller. And I don't know, it's well written and plotted very well. Again, I think this one, definitely kept my entertainment up. I was into it, but some of these thrillers are so variable. So I can't say if you would like it, but I can say that you've probably not read it yet. Finally, I've got An Unsettled Grave by Bernard Schaffer, and this one has 256 ratings and a 4.41 average. This one I read a while ago when it came out. This is an ARC, came out in 2019. And actually, this is a book 2 in the series. So if that is going to bother you, you should read the first one, which is called The Thief of All Light. But An Unsettled Grave is very dark. It is about a female detective named Carrie who was given a rare glimpse into the mind of a killer. She had been mentored by this guy named Jacob Rain, who was a seasoned manhunter. She was able to sort of work with him in the previous novel and capture one of the most depraved serial killers in the country. But now they've discovered a small human foot buried in the Pennsylvania woods, which leads her to a decades-old cold case and the darkest secrets of her mentor's younger days. And this one, if you like police procedurals, I think this is really good. The author is a former police officer himself. So I think a lot of the investigation and things like that do play true to form. This one I will say is gritty though, but if you like smart female detectives, you might like this one. Another one that you probably have not read yet. So that is it. That is my short list of thrillers that you probably haven't read yet and are completely worth your time, depending on what type of thriller reader you are. I would love to have some of your under the radar recommendations here in the comments. So please leave me some. I feel like I'm desperate to read a new thriller, read something that is compelling, something that'll get me excited to read thrillers. But I feel like I've read so many of the same story over and over again. So under the radar thrillers are the ones that I have my eye on. But as always, thank you for being here. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, leave me a comment, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.